Welcome back into the mental game, where this week's guest is actor and comedian Joel Kim Booster.
I was suicidal. I was violent. I was out of control, major meltdowns, obviously something wrong. But my parents were the kind of religious where I saw Christian therapists. I did not see any real therapists.
And in this episode, Joel opens up about his acting career and stand-up comedy, where he has shined on the stage and also on the screen, being in movies and TV shows like Loot on Apple TV or his own movie, Fire Island. But he also opens up about his own personal battle with mental health and coming out as a child, as gay, and thinking he was going to hell because of his sexuality. He talks about his suicidal thoughts and how he started going to therapy and taking care of his mental health. All of that and much, much more coming up in this episode. But first, I want to tell you about Man Therapy. And guys, I am talking to you because, look, we have to be comfortable being emotional and being vulnerable about how we are feeling. So I want you to go to mantherapy.org today to find amazing tools and resources to take care of your mental health. But now it is time for the latest episode here on The Mental Game with Joel Kim Booster. Welcome back into the mental game. As you can see, I got a very special guest sitting next to me, Joel Kim Booster, actor, writer, comedian. Thank you so much for coming on the mental game.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
You got a busy day here in LA, running around doing some different interviews. I just moved into this place yesterday.
It's sick. Yeah, no, it's great.
Thanks so much for coming by. I'm really excited to get into your story, from acting, comedy, your life, mental health. You've done it all. You've been in this career now for probably over 10 years, right?
Yeah, I've been doing stand-up for 13 going on 14 years.
Wow, that's incredible.
And I quit my day job in 2016. So
what was your day job?
I worked in tech.
Okay, gotcha. I heard back in the day you worked at the Olive Garden.
I did, yeah. Back in college, I was an Olive Garden waiter, and you know what? Still would eat there.
Okay.
See how the sausage got made? Still would eat there anytime, any place. Yeah.
I'm a former Chipotle kitchen manager.
Okay, wow.
And so
yeah.
I still go back to Chipotle.
Big fan of your work. Yeah.
Oh, thank you so much. I can't cook right now. But let's get into your whole story. It is really inspiring how much you've been able to achieve on the screen, on the stage, through comedy. But the first thing I ask everyone on the mental game is, what does mental health mean to you? And it's a very unique question because we all have our own journeys, but I ask you the same thing. What does it mean to you?
I think for me, mental health is about my relationship to stability and how in control and stable I feel at any given point in time. Obviously, mental health does not necessarily denote good mental health or bad mental health. It just is the state, of your mental health. And for me, it's always relational to stability.
Yeah.
For me.
Well, for you, this career, if you look at it, it can be an unstable thing.
Very much so, yeah.
Did you always dream of being an entertainer? I think you did theater growing up, and
I always had I always wanted to be the center of attention. I always wanted to be in some capacity since I was a little boy, like an actor, or then later a writer, and then a comic and things like that. So it's evolved and it's come back and forth and stuff like that. But always definitely wanted to be in some way connected to this world. And
your upbringing, grew up outside of Chicago. Yeah. You were adopted originally from South Korea. Yep. For you, what was your childhood like at home with you had other siblings?
I had an older brother, older sister. They were biological to my parents. And it was weird. I mean, I was homeschooled until I was 16.
Oh, wow.
Grew up very evangelical Christian, very sheltered, very not really given much control or of my own life. It sucked. It was pretty bad.
Do you think that's where that creative juice came from, as maybe an escape or a natural
Yeah,
therapeutic
I mean, I've
thing?
always had like a pretty active imagination, always really like escaping into my own little world in my head and things like that since I was like a young kid. And I, was a huge reader. No one really homeschooled us. Like it was all, we were basically left to our own devices.
Mm.
And so I wasn't really like, I was getting the math answers out of the back of the book. Like I did not know math, science, geography,
Oh, wow.
history, and English were the only subjects that I ever paid attention to. I'm like very grateful that I was a big reader because it's the only reason I have any sort of education or intelligence
Yeah.
now. But yeah, it was a pretty rough transition going into school suddenly.
So you went to high school, what,
Junior year, yeah.
junior year? Okay. Well, going back to being homeschooled, you said you grew up in a really religious house. For you, talking about mental health, how did that affect your life personally on the inside?
I mean, listen, like I had a lot of really, I struggled a lot even back then. Even as a kid, I was really unstable mentally. Um, you know, Major meltdowns, obviously something wrong. But my parents were the kind of religious where like I saw Christian therapists. I did
Mm.
not see any real therapists, and they were very against putting me on any sort of medication, ever sort of going down that path. And like I was suicidal, I was violent, I was like out of control
Yeah.
in spurts. And like it just never was a path they were willing to explore. Like they wanted me to pray it all away. They did not want me to talk to any normal, reputable like mental health specialist.
You mentioned suicidal thoughts. I had my first suicidal thought at 14 as a freshman in high school. Really traumatic experience where a picture got sent around the whole school, and it was like just probably looking back now, maybe the most traumatic thing of my life. For you, you mentioned having a suicidal thought. How young were you when that first happened, and can you point to what directed you to that?
Yeah, absolutely. I was like probably 13, and it was definitely like thinking I was going to hell or that I was going to be gay, and there was nothing I could do to change it.
Did that Were you afraid to come out to your parents, to your family, to your friends because of maybe the religious reasons? Is that
Yeah,
what held you
absolutely. I
most?
I planned on never coming out to my family. Like that was always the plan, was not to ever come out and like live a very separate life eventually. And yeah, it was never something that I thought I would want to do or have to do. Um yeah.
That's a really tough internal struggle to go back and forth, and you have to have a comfortability with yourself
Hmm.
to be able to one, come out to yourself, but also come out to family and
Right.
friends. When did you feel comfortable doing that? Was it, moving out of home and starting
No,
your
I mean, I
career?
came out when I was 16 at school. I was out for a full year at school. And then my senior year, my parents read my journal.
Mm.
And that's how they found out. And this was like after a full year of being out, hooking up, drinking, smoking, partying, doing all of the things that I couldn't do when I was homeschooled. And like they gave me like an ounce of freedom by sending me to public school. And I just went, absolutely nuts for a year. And then they read all of that in my journal. And I had a complete mental breakdown. I was institutionalized for a week, came back to school, moved out of my house at 17, couch hopped, slept in my car. I ended up staying with a classmate of mine for the rest of my senior year. But yeah, it was a really tough time. And I didn't really talk to my parents again until I was in college, probably.
Wow. Well, and you go through that traumatic experience of moving out, coming out, trying to go off to college and start your career, and this maybe new life for you.
Hmm.
How did you take a step forward without going back into those depression, anxiety filled thoughts?
I mean, I didn't. I
Yeah.
was like pretty depressed and anxious through most of my college experience, through most of my 20s. I didn't have great health insurance. I didn't start seeing a therapist regularly until I was probably in my 30s.
Wow.
Yeah.
It took me, I think, 15 years to finally ask for help. Like I
Hmm.
got to rock bottom, and it just got me to a point where like I didn't know what else to do. I told my mom, I don't know how to live anymore.
Right.
For you, what made you flip that switch to ask? Because you've been very, very open about your mental health, struggling with being bipolar, your anxiety, depression. I think was a newer thing for you to feel, but you've been open about everything. What
Right.
what kind of made you go get help?
I mean, it was just like increasingly year after year getting really hard to not fuck up my life with, what I now recognize were, you know, hypomanic or depressive cycles in my life. And like, I would do things like try and quit jobs that I was cast in an NBC sitcom. It was a huge big break for me. It was life changing. It was the only, like, the money that I made from that short-lived first season of that show was the reason I was able to pay off my student loans and like get myself out of massive debt and like set myself up to be, somewhat financially secure for the first time in my entire life. And I was manic and tried to quit that job, locked myself in my house for 3 days. And there were like constant instances of things like that popping up in my life where I would fuck up a relationship or I would fuck up a career thing or almost fuck up a career thing. And it just became so untenable that I finally, saw a psychologist or psychiatrist rather. And that's when, we put the pieces together and I was diagnosed BP2. And that was like the start of a journey where like I was able to put a name to it, and then which was really like it's tough. It's tough to have someone tell you have that disease. It's not something that you want to admit or have or deal with, but I'm so much better off having a word for it than before.
So you're in your 30s, you go to therapy for the first time, learn that you are struggling with bipolar, with the anxiety, but you're having success in your career. And that's the thing that's not funny. Like, I think I just go to that word because you're a comedian, but it's strange from the outside. People would think you're happy. I mean, I've had Terry Crews, Kate Flannery, a lot of actors and musicians on this show where they say the same thing. They get to a point, they get that break, but they're almost breaking on the inside without anyone knowing.
Yeah.
When did you feel comfortable being more open about how you're feeling, what you're going through?
I mean, for me, I think I've always been really transparent about almost every part of my life on stage. Like, I mine a lot of my personal life from my material. So many of the things that I write are from personal experience. So it wasn't a problem of like being afraid to address it or talk about it. For me, it was like not wanting to put a name to it. And I think that's what held me back for so long. And also like being a little apprehensive about wanting to treat it too, because listen, like I get a shit ton done when I'm manic. I feel great. I feel the best version of myself. I'm charismatic, but I'm also deeply out of control, and something can set me off and like trigger me into doing something crazy, like try to quit a job that is really life-changing and important and like fuck up my life in some way. So I think it was like as I got more stable career-wise and had more money and had more freedom and wasn't grinding out in the same way that I was for most of my 20s and early 30s, like it just became harder to ignore.
Yeah, well, and when you see that it works, when you start taking care of it, it makes a difference. Whether it's, depression, I'm also sober. Like, it's just, once you see it work, it makes a huge difference in your life. You get these breaks, you start, progressing on stand-up. You're having, big shows. You're on late night. You start booking even bigger shows like Loot, and you're really at the top of your career, in that moment. But you start treating yourself and start going to therapy, figuring out that you do have to take care of yourself. Was there a rock bottom moment for you before that point or around that point when you're trying to figure it out?
Not necessarily. I mean, there've been a bunch, like, honestly, since my diagnosis and since I have experimented with going off my meds and going back on my meds and trying different dosages of meds. I will say there wasn't like one rock bottom moment that made me go into getting it checked out. I think it was just a lot of little things and a lot of like damaged relationships that really were sort of the moment where I was like, okay, I have to really take care of myself and look into this. I think part of it though was I just never had the money. I never had the healthcare coverage to deal with it. I didn't have the time. I was working 50 hours a week and doing 3 open mics a night every single night. It just like wasn't tenable for me to ever sit down and address it. I didn't have the money. I didn't have the time. I didn't have the healthcare. So it was like I was finally at a place in my life where I had a little bit of time. I had a little bit of money. I had good healthcare for first time in a while. And so it just felt right and like it was time.
Did those suicidal thoughts ever come back from 13 later?
Yeah, for sure.
Did you battle those throughout New York, LA when you were doing open mics? And
no, I would say it was much more in the last like 5 years, probably like post a lot of the success, honestly, was when it really came back, I think, because it is this thing of like suddenly you have everything that you thought would make you really, really happy, and then you don't have like, and if it doesn't, then it is just really hard to like be like, well, then what, you know?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's pretty tough in that regard.
I don't. This is a show where you can open up as much as you want to, and if I ask something that's too far, please let me know. What brought those thoughts back? Do you think was it like that empty feeling, even though you had everything you ever wanted? Was it relationship things? I know you had some things come up in your life. You lost your dad.
Yeah.
Battling different relationship.
No,
things.
I mean, it was never. I mean, it was never like in relation to something like losing my dad. It was always like I was either in a depressive cycle or a manic cycle, and something would set me off, and like I would, you know, yeah, it would just be something that it was never something major or life changing that would set it off.
Gotcha.
Ever.
It's just something that you realized, and now you've had the tools through therapy, through medicine to take care of yourself. You mentioned like going off your medication sometimes. How did you notice? And look, I take oh shoot, why am I blanking on it? Listened to another interview by you. We take the same thing.
Abilify, Wellbutrin.
Wellbutrin. Yeah. I notice it just keeps me level.
Yeah, no, I mean, Wellbutrin really like has saved my life in a lot of different ways. But for me, I would go off, and I have gone off a couple different times because of the antipsychotic that I'm on, Abilify. Like, was very convinced for a while that it was killing my creativity, that it was like sort of numbing me out a little bit. I wasn't able to access certain parts of my creative self, or I thought anyways, and like that's kind of like the lie that the disease tells you a little bit, and so I would go on and off depending on how I was feeling in that regard, and then like hit rock bottom, go do something, like it would just become untenable again, go back on, and like I've since like really found a good balance in the right dosages and things that work for me, and bring me enough stability without sort of crushing, I think, the other parts of me that make me, you know?
Yeah, well, I think if I got my timeline right, when you went off medication for a little bit, it was right after the pandemic, or maybe 2021, 20.
It's been a couple times. It's been like 3 major times. It was like during shooting of Fire Island, and then last summer, and then probably, yeah, maybe like right before Fire Island too. I'm not exactly sure. It's hard to keep it all like track of it now, but yeah.
Going back to kind of that time frame, before we started talking, I talked about an interview as depressed mode, I think is what it's called. And I mentioned how when I go back and look at myself 2 years ago, I don't even recognize myself. That interview, I listened to it, and it was really, really powerful because you were open, honest, and just you were really, really struggling. It seemed
in
like
the middle of it,
for the first maybe like major elongated time in your life, you were going through a lot. We had the pandemic. You lost your dad. You just felt kind of stuck, it seemed like. For you now, looking back at that person, and you admitted to me that you hadn't listened to the whole interview before, which I get. I don't watch myself back all the time either. It can be kind of weird. But for you, looking back on that time, how did you cope with losing your dad during COVID? It can be something that I know, looking back, your family dynamic and how you were raised might have had some effect on your relationship with him. But when you lost him, it seemed like it did play into kind of the depression that you had felt at the time.
Sure, yeah. I mean, like, I'm grateful that my dad and I were in the best place that we've ever been in my entire life, probably right before he passed. And so I'm grateful for that, in a sense, that like we were on such great terms and we had mended a lot of things before he passed. But I mean, the thing is that like the episodes, and the depressive episodes especially, are not really in relation to anything. Like, I would not say that my dad's death, that the pandemic, I mean, maybe the pandemic more so than anything, because I was just so understimulated. But yeah, I hesitate to point to any one thing other than my own chemicals that bring me to those states. Because I can, it's happened like when I've been really happy and successful. There's no rhyme or reason to any of it.
Yeah. Well, the creativity thing that you mentioned of like you couldn't write jokes for over a year. when did you feel that come back? Because look, that's your
Yeah.
livelihood, that's your job, and that's what you love to do, whether it's, writing a show, writing a movie, jokes. I mean, when did you find that come back?
Um, Pretty recently. I think it was a little bit like I stopped trying to force it a lot, and I stopped being so. I was just obsessively thinking
Mm,
about the absence of something,
yeah,
and so for me, like it really was just about letting go of the fixation. Like
yeah,
if you are just so fixated, it's like honestly it's like getting hard. Really it is. Like the minute, if you're not getting hard and you're hooking up with somebody, the minute you address it or think about it, it's game over. It's just
yeah,
never going to happen. It's never going to happen. You're never going to get hard if you're thinking about the fact that
it's
you're not
true.
getting hard. And I think creativity is really similar to that.
Mhm,
Whereas like I would just sit around and be like, I'm not being creative, nothing's coming, nothing's coming, nothing's coming. And the more you think about it that way,
right.
the less it's going to come naturally, you know? And so I think for me, it was just sort of like settling into a good rhythm in my life and like my partner and like my, just like letting go of feeling like I needed to force it to come. And then it came, you know?
Yeah. Well, for you, it's your natural talent
Sure.
and it's things that you love to do, but you see it in sports, people press, or even, like you're talking about in your job when you're, actor, comedian, you press, you almost can't figure
No,
it
if you
out.
have the yips, then like you cannot get out of it by like thinking about the fact that you have the yips. It's just not gonna, it's
Right.
never gonna come back.
And you get it back. You start writing jokes again. You're back on tour doing different shows, and we just mentioned that Loot just wrapped up. That experience when you start to get, you mentioned before getting this show on NBC that really was your first big break. Now, I mean, your career, it seemed like the last 3 to 4 years has really taken off
Yeah,
to a
yeah.
new level. When you get a job on a show like Loot, where you're one of the main stars on the show, how does that change your life? Did you feel pressure from the inside? Was it excitement, a mix of both?
Yeah, I mean, a mix of both, definitely. I mean, I was off my meds at a certain point while we were shooting the first season of Loot and really almost fucked that up too, in a lot of different ways because I was just very unstable while shooting the first season of that show. And it really is one of those things you have to learn very quickly is that success is not going to bring happiness. Like, you really have to
Mhm.
be able to find the stability and not have it be connected to, outside, you know, success or edification or any of that stuff. Like, I think I thought that with the success that I was finding professionally, it would all sort of fall into place and I wouldn't have to worry about it so much anymore. And that wasn't the case at all.
For you, was there healthy coping mechanisms that helped you through those moments? Because I mean, I can point to unhealthy ones. Like I said, I was
No,
an
I
alcohol.
think mostly unhealthy for sure.
Were you
Yeah.
were you able to identify those and correct them at a certain point? Is that kind of what helped you turn the corner? You think?
No, I think like I still have a lot of really unhealthy coping mechanisms and it's just a lot of about like sort of stabilizing them and like having creating a more healthy relationship to some of the things that I do to cope and to de-stress and decompress and stuff like that. For me, I think like my relationship was really like what forced me to get it under control, and that's not great. Like, I don't recommend doing it for someone else, but it was a mix of having to do it for making myself the best version and the healthiest version of myself so that I was able to participate in my relationship. And
Yeah.
like, had that not been there, I think maybe the job would have probably pulled me out of it too. But it's just really easy to fake it. I
Hmm.
think when you like at work specifically and with friendships, it was less easy to fake it in my relationship. And I think that's what really like, there was no ultimatums or anything like that, but he made it very clear that like if I didn't take care of myself, then he was not going to be the one to do that for me.
Well, having a strong partner there through that moment, and when I went through my, worst part of my life, like me and my ex, broke up, but she was there for me in ways that other people maybe couldn't be. For you, at that point of your life, having that support, that rock, that had to be life
Yeah,
changing.
no, it definitely was.
And what were maybe some of the biggest things that he did that helped you through those moments that maybe, like, obviously you're going to therapy, you're on
Yeah.
medication, but again, that's a very unique position somebody can be in to help you through those moments.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like this mix of like unconditional love mixed with accountability,
Yeah.
Like I think like he was like I will love you through all of this as long as I see you making an effort to you know, make things better for yourself. Like, I can't be the only one who's working here. And I
Right.
think like it was a mix of like knowing that he wasn't going to leave me because of this. He was going to leave me because of my uh, refusal to work on it, you know? And so like it was a mixed sort of like unconditional love mix met with accountability that I think was really important.
Well, I say this all the time, and I, talk at high schools and colleges about mental health and try to help people the best I can. And I've lost friends to suicide or to drug overdoses. And if the person in the mirror doesn't want to get better, you can have all the support, whether it's family, friends, therapy, medicine. But if you yourself doesn't want to get better, feel
Yeah.
better, you can't. And I
Right.
think I give you a lot of praise for wanting to do that for yourself, but it does help to have a partner
Yeah.
that supports you through that. Joel and I have talked about it throughout this episode. Therapy has helped us both so much with our mental health and taking care of it throughout our mental health journey. And that's why I want to tell you about Man Therapy. And guys, I'm talking to you because look, for so long we were taught we had to be these tough, strong guys that didn't show our emotions and didn't be vulnerable. But look, vulnerability is now a strength, and we have to talk about how we're feeling. And that's why I want you to go to mantherapy.org right now and take their 18-point head inspection. It's an amazing, quick, just 2-minute test that asks you basic questions about your everyday life, work, and how you're feeling to help you take better care of your mental health and connect you with amazing mental health tools, resources, and tips that can help you all throughout your life. So again, go to mantherapy.org to find those amazing tools and resources today to take the best care of your mental health. And I'm excited this week to announce a new partnership here on the Mental Game with the Happiness Project. You know, suicide can be really tough to talk about, and that's why the Happiness Project is helping break the stigma. After losing their classmate Nick, his friends knew they had to do something to help save lives. So, the Happiness Project was born, and it's a clothing brand to raise awareness for mental health and suicide prevention, with t-shirts and hoodies just like this to start a conversation and let people know they are not alone. To learn more, follow @Happiness Project on social media and use code MENTALGAME for 15% off your order at happinessproject.com. Like I mentioned, you're all over the place now, doing stand-up on TV, Loot just rapped, like we said. For you, are there goals or are there things out there that you haven't got to yet that you're like, I want to go out and grab this?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like, I'm never gonna like. I'm constantly moving the goalposts for myself, and I think like, I think a lot of what I have achieved now is what I hoped would be like sort of the end game. Like, I never thought I would get to this point in my career. I thought it would sort of be like the end of my career. I would maybe get this level of success, and so it's been a lot of reorienting and figuring out what I want for the next goal to be. And like yeah, I'm never going to be satisfied. I don't think anybody really is.
That hungriness when you are creative, especially in a place like New York or LA, I mean, you're battling out people every single
Yeah.
day, whether on set or in an audition. Do you have a favorite? This is hard to ask, but do you have a favorite show that you've been a part of, or a favorite set, something that you look back
I mean,
on?
it's definitely Fire Island. I mean,
Okay,
like
yeah. 'Cause you wrote
I
that,
wrote it,
too.
I starred in it, I executive produced it. I liked wearing all those hats. I liked leading the ship, or co-leading it with Andrew On, my director. And yeah, that felt like the most self-actualized version of myself that creatively and professionally that I've ever been.
Looking back at the kid that was 13 that had that suicidal thought and didn't feel comfortable telling people who he truly was, could you have ever dreamed up the stuff you would be doing like Fire Island
No.
like this right now?
No, there was never a model for it in my head. There was never like, yeah, I would never have imagined this is what my life would look like.
But it's a good thing.
Yeah, definitely.
It's really incredible to watch. For you, just how do you mentioned some of the unhealthy things that maybe you still do, but healthy ones that do help you when you're having a bad day. I mean, I don't want to call us doing this interview a bad day, but I can tell that you've got a lot going on, which
Yeah.
I get. It happens to people out here. What are healthy things that kind of help you through maybe days like this?
I think it is about I think it's about grace. Like, I think learning to give yourself a little bit of grace and about what you are able to accomplish on days that you're not feeling great about. It's about balance. I think it's about understanding and like acknowledging the work that you have been able to accomplish throughout all of this, and like giving yourself the grace to take a step back and be like, maybe I do just need couch time right now, and like maybe I can like, I accomplished XYZ, and like maybe I needed to accomplish a few more things, but I'm going to take a step back today and like give myself some grace and allow myself to not be pushed to the limit. And I think like knowing where the limit is and learning that you don't always have to go up to it is like a really important part, especially about being in this industry.
That's making me think of the word boundaries, which I didn't
Yeah.
understand what the hell it was
sure.
before maybe 2 or 3 years ago. Has your look on boundaries changed in your personal and professional life?
Yeah, I think so. I think I just have a better understanding of where those lines are.
Yeah.
And again, like how close I can actually get to them before my breaking point. And it's about like, I think when you come from a mindset that I come from, especially when I was coming up, like it didn't come from money. I was very poor for, the last up until very recently. And I think like you learn to say yes to everything. You learn to never say, never turn down an opportunity, always should be working. Like if I wasn't working, I felt bad. And I think it's about like readjusting those levels a little bit for yourself and understanding that like downtime is not bad, and that like, I work, really being able to put the work you're doing in context and understand that like I did get a lot done today. Just because I didn't get as much done, or like I'm not working myself to the bone anymore because I don't have to work myself to the bone. You get really addicted to, I think, the struggle sometimes when you're coming up, when you're hustling, and like it feels like you're doing so much. And I think like re-level setting when you get to a place of stability, whether it's financially or professionally or both, is really important.
You mentioned like finding that balance in life. You're having that success now. You're at your top of your mountain for the time being. You still have a peak to discover, but now you're going back on the road, still doing stand-up. Is that I know you mentioned that Fire Island's like your favorite, most proud product that you've ever done. Do you think stand-up's your like most natural element? I mean, I know you're a great actor too, but you can be so expressive creatively, independently. Is that?
I think I don't know that I would say I would rank any of the three. The
I'm not trying to get you to play favorites, I guess. Yeah.
No, but like for me, I think like stand-up is the only or the closest thing to a meritocracy in the entertainment industry in a lot of ways, because like I think like a lot of my success, people want to like take away from it or denigrate it or what have you, because like, oh, you only got there because of DEI, you're a diversity hire, like blah blah blah, you benefited from all of these diversity pushes, and that's the only reason you're successful. But with stand up, you're in the room and you're either making people laugh or you're not. And like people do not laugh at you because of woke. Okay. Like it's just not like even the most like progressive liberal people like will still sit there stone faced if you're not funny. And I think like for me, it's the thing that I hold on to the most, because like as much as like the doubts want to set in when people are like, oh, you're only a diversity hire, when I'm on stage making people laugh, like in that moment, it's like, okay, like that is the only feedback that I need. And like I really want to hold on to that because it does, like it's really easy to get into your head about like, because this is, I mean, the fact is like it's a balance, right? Like I am very talented and I know I've gotten to where I am because I'm talented, but there's also so many political decisions that go into casting or like getting a movie made or any of those things that don't necessarily have to do with talent or how good you are. And I understand that like it's a political game, or like maneuvering in Hollywood, and like you have to understand that and you have to know how to play the game. There aren't really that many games with stand up. It's just you're out there, you're telling a joke, they're laughing or they're not, and it's as simple as that. And I want to hold on to that simplicity for as long as I possibly can until I have nothing interesting left to say.
Well, your life has had a lot of chapters. So your stand up on stage, you tell a lot about your life, things that you've experienced, gone through, which I love. And the thing about here in LA, and I know you experienced it in New York, I mean, you were probably going, you said 3 open mics a night, so you're bouncing around to the cellar, different places like that, just trying to get your start.
Yeah.
It's that's one of the things that I love about LA is you can go any night and see somebody at the Comedy Store, at the Laugh Factory. How much do you love just popping into a place like that and working on material?
I still like it. I'm all over the place in LA. I will say it's like different now because people know me a little bit more, and like I love doing like a surprise headlining set at the store, because it's a lot of people who aren't there for me, and so many of my shows now are populated by people who like me, and like are fans and like are excited to see me, which is like a different vibe than people that you have to go out on stage and like really prove yourself
Right,
to,
you got
because
to
they,
win.
they have no idea who you are and are not fans, and like that's much more rewarding for me as a comic than like performing for people who are my fans.
It's like I would talk to NFL players. They love playing on the road more because they
Yeah,
want to shut up those
yeah,
fans
absolutely.
or ruin their day. Okay, you got shows coming up, like you said, I think in Chicago.
Chicago, the June 14th and 15th at the Den Theater.
Okay, awesome. Are you on tour throughout the summer, or
I wouldn't say on tour, but I'm bouncing around a lot. I'm doing a lot of road dates for sure. Not like a sustained tour right now, but yeah, I'm getting out there.
Gotcha, awesome. Chicago here in when this comes out next week. For you, last thing I'll ask, advice to, and we've been talking a lot about comedy, a young stand-up, a young aspiring actor that
Yeah.
maybe is that kid struggling at 14, 15, doesn't think there's a place for them, and they have those big dreams.
Yeah, I think like the thing that I always tell people, like, it's really hard to replicate any one person's path to success in this industry. But the one thing I think you can do is, there's so much of it is luck, and like you can't recreate that. But what you can do is you can be prepared and do all the prep work so that when your opportunity comes, you are ready to seize it. Like, I think the best example of this is like, I randomly got my first manager and only manager, I'm still with him, back in like 2014, 2015. I was doing a comedy festival in Portland, and he saw me do a bar show, showcase, like 10 minutes in this bar in Portland. And you cannot plan for that, right?
Yeah.
But I was like, I had my 10 minutes. That was tight. He liked it. He talked to me. And then in that next meeting where he was like, deciding if he was going to sign me or not, like he asked me a lot of questions, and he was like, do you have a script? Like, I know you say you want to write, like, do you have a sample ready? And the thing is I did. I was like fully prepared. I was like, I had been prepping for that meeting for years leading up to that meeting.
Yeah.
I was like, yes, I have a sample that I've been working on that's ready to go. Here it is. I was able to point to all of these different things to prove that I was ready for that moment. And I think like you have to be ready for your moment. And it requires a lot of like, listen, I was at my day job writing that script, like on every lunch break, getting, staying late, doing whatever I needed to do, all on top of going to all these open mics and on top of all these things. And I had to make a lot of sacrifices. I did not have a personal life really outside of stand-up. And like, I worked, this incredibly intense day job on top of all of it, but like I still found time to do the prep work so that when the opportunity came, I was able to say like, yes, I'm ready for this. And like, that's what you can prepare for. You cannot create those moments. You cannot like plan for them necessarily, but you can be prepared for them when they happen. And I think that is the biggest piece of advice that I can give, because again, it's impossible to replicate my journey of success. Sure. But like that one thing I think is possible for everybody to do.
Well, I love it. You have to work harder than everyone else. And then, like you said, be ready when you get your moment and seize it when it's there. Joel, thank you so much for coming on the Mental Game and opening up. Appreciate it so much. And again, go see him next week in Chicago. We'll keep watching you on the screen, on the stage. Thanks so much.
Thanks, man.
We'll see everybody right back here next week on the Mental Game. And I love that conversation with Joel. I can't thank him enough for coming on the Mental Game and really telling his mental health story. If you haven't watched him on TV or his stand-up specials, you got to check him out. Joel is so freaking funny, but also, as you just heard in this interview, he's got a really inspirational story, and I'm so thankful he shared it with us right here on the Mental Game. Next week, we have another surprise guest here in LA, and I'll give you 2 hints. Number 1, they are an actor. And number 2, they are from the hit TV comedy Parks and Recreation. Those are your 2 hints, and we'll see you right back here next week on The Mental Game.